Welcome, everyone. The webinar will begin at the top of the hour, and it will be recorded. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. Please use the hashtags GLReading and or hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's conversation, and we'll be sure to retweet it. We strongly encourage you to share your reflections, your questions, and observations on social media. So once again, connect with the campaign on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account @ReadingByThird. The webinar will begin shortly, and it will be recorded for you.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, Bridging the Early Years and Early Grades to Reduce Learning Loss. This is the last in our 7-part series of webinars highlighting the Learning Loss Recovery Challenge. And if you've missed any of the previous sessions in this series and are interested in learning more about them, I've posted a link to the clip folder in the chat box, so you can find those and explore the resources that were shared in each of those. My name is Sarah Torian, and I'm a consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, and I'm working to manage this online learning series. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a couple of really quick housekeeping details with you. First of all, I'd invite you to introduce yourself. Let us know your name, organization, and the name of the GLR coalition that you're a part of, if you're a part of a GLR coalition, using the chat box on your Zoom screen. Also wanted to share that all webinar attendees will be participating in listen-only mode throughout today's conversation, and that's to avoid any background noises or distractions during the presentations, but we do strongly encourage your active engagement throughout this conversation, so I'd encourage you to share any thoughts or reflections that come to you during the presentations using the chat box on your Zoom screen, and to share any questions that you'd like to pose of our panelists today using the Q&A box on your Zoom screen. Third, just a quick reminder that today's webinar is being recorded and that a link to that recording will be sent out to all who registered for today's conversation, along with links to the slides, bios, and related resources that are shared during today's conversation. So keep an eye out for that email. It should come out either late this week or early next week. And then finally, just wanted to give you a quick heads up that we will be posting a very brief survey poll after the presentations are complete and during the Q&A portion of the webinar. And I'd encourage you to take just a couple of quick moments to share your thoughts and feedback on today's conversation. It really does help us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Now I'd like to share just a little bit of background about the GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar series. As you can see on the screen in front of you, we've got a number of great sessions planned for the coming weeks, with a session every Tuesday in the 3 p.m. Eastern time slot. Our hypothesis that this predictable and reliable schedule would make it easier for those of you in our network to join in for these conversations on a regular basis has really been confirmed as we've seen our attendance and registration numbers continue to grow over the past several months and remain consistently strong. And so we hope that you'll make plans to continue joining in for these conversations as we're moving deeper into the summer months. We've now hosted 40 webinars since we launched this series last September, so I would also encourage you to check out GLR. That's the campaign's community learning for impact and improvement platform, where you can find the growing archive of resources from these online learning sessions, exploring the best science, programs, and ideas to inform our efforts to ensure early school success for more children from low-income families. We've recently kind of reorganized that archive on GLR because with 40 webinars, it was becoming a little bit hard to find the resources that you were interested in there. So there is now a separate folder for each of those 40 webinars where you can find the recordings, the slide decks, the bios, and all related resources. So I'd encourage you to check that out. If you're not familiar with GLR, again, there's a link in the chat box that you can use to join and begin accessing all of those resources. Now, I'm also excited to share that we are about to launch another special series of online conversations, especially for the hundreds of funders who have been supporting early learning, grade level reading, and early school success campaigns in the 300+ communities that are a part of our nationwide network. We've got 3 of these special funder-to-funder conversations planned for the month of July, and also have plans to return with additional sessions later in the fall. They're designed to provide space to explore possibilities for shared learning, collaboration, and even co-investment between and among the local funders and their more national counterparts. So for the funders who are on the call with us today, keep an eye out for more information about these sessions, and I hope that you'll make plans to save the date and join us for the last 3 Tuesdays in July. That's the 14th, 21st, and 28th in that 12:30 p.m. Eastern time slot. And now one more quick but important update to share before we get started with today's conversation. As most of you probably know, the campaign decided to go virtual with this year's GLR week. And so I'm happy to share a few details on some of the sessions that we have planned for that week. That's July 13th through the 17th. On the screen, you can see some of the sessions that we have scheduled, in addition to the GLR Learning Tuesday session and the funder-to-funder conversation that I just mentioned previously. Registration information for each of these will be forthcoming shortly, so I hope you'll keep an eye out for those. And also, many of the states and communities that are engaged in this work are also planning their own events, releasing reports, showing video screenings, etc., as a part of GLR Week. So we're going to be sharing a calendar with events being organized by state and local leaders, so that you'll have information about how to tap into this amazing resource of local information and state-level information as well. So stay tuned for more on that. But now for today's conversation. I'm sure that nobody on the call with us today, it's not news for any of you, the importance of the early years in ensuring success for children and early school success. We know that by engaging and supporting children and families during these critical early learning years is an important part of efforts to ensure early school success. And fortunately, a growing number of school districts across the country have begun to recognize the importance of strengthening connections with early learning strategies and with families of young children. So today, we're going to hear from leaders engaged in 3 exemplary efforts where partners are joining with district leaders to support those connections. These efforts are important all the time, but they have proven especially valuable in recent months, and they provided a foundation for school leaders as they have worked to prevent learning loss during the extended school closures that we've all been facing. And so to begin that conversation, I'm incredibly honored and excited to introduce our moderator for today. That's Dr. Marina Merrill. Marina joined the Children's Institute in 2013 to lead its research on prenatal through 3rd grade issues, evaluation, data collection, and analysis. She also advises the Children's Institute's advocacy and policy work and serves as the state lead for Oregon's grade level reading efforts. So welcome, Marina. Thank you so much for joining us for today and for all of the work and planning that you put into today's conversation.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that great introduction. Good afternoon and welcome to everybody. I see so many friendly and familiar people out there in the audience. I really appreciate you joining us today. And as Sarah mentioned, during today's webinar, we're going to hear from leaders that are part of 3 distinctly different P3 partnerships in 3 states in California, Oregon, and Nebraska. All 3 initiatives are working to improve the quality and coherence of early learning experiences extending up through the elementary grades, all with a shared goal of improving student success. I'm going to be asking each of the teams a set of questions, and they're going to share how they're approaching the work to align and improve systems and instruction and partner with families within their unique contexts. We will also discuss how these existing efforts and partnerships have provided a foundation to rapidly respond during the pandemic to mitigate children's learning loss during the recent school closures. We're also going to hear about their early thinking about the transition back to school this fall. We're going to hear about the bright spots and the challenges of doing the work in this very challenging context that we're all in right now. So before I begin with the introduction of our panelists, I just wanted to share that this webinar was briefly inspired by one of my dear colleagues and mentors, Ruby Takanishi. Many of you may already know Ruby is one of the foundational thought leaders of the P3 movement nationally. Ruby has worked for years to inspire educators to push for educational reform, beginning with preschool as a fundamental human right. As a mentor and colleague, Ruby Takanishi is the connector and convener between all three of these initiatives that you're going to hear from today. And she continuously encourages us to share and learn from one another and to collaborate, even when the work is super messy and complex, which it is, and it's always evolving. Ruby has helped our organization, the Children's Institute, in evolving our own P3 work to better integrate the brain science and the developmental science to inform instructional practices that map to what the science tells us about how children learn best, including how to support dual language learners, which we're going to hear more about today as well. I'm so grateful to be here to share this work with you today, and I'm truly honored to be a part of this panel. And now I'm going to transition to introduce each of the presentation teams. So today we're going to be hearing from Dr. Anya Hurwitz, who currently serves as the Executive Director of SEAL, or the Sobrato Early Academic Language, which began as a project of the Sobrato Family Foundation in 2008, and officially became an independent organization in July 2019. Dr. Hurwitz previously served as a teacher, school leader, district administrator, and has worked in education-focused nonprofits. She's joined today by Linda Montes, who's the Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services for the Redwood City School District in the San Francisco Bay Area. Dr. Montes also oversees the Department for English Learner Services, and she has provided guidance in the development of immersion and bilingual programs in the Bay Area, and currently leads the professional learning experiences for site leadership and classroom teachers, focused on closing the opportunity gap for students with emphasis on the implementation of the SEAL model. So really excited to have them join us today. We also are going to have Dr. Lisa Roy. So next slide. Dr. Lisa Roy is also joining us, and she is currently serving as the Director of Program Development at the Buffett Institute, which she recently joined in 2019. Before joining the Buffett Institute, Dr. Roy was with the Institute from Denver Public Schools, where she served as Executive Director of the Early Childhood Department. And Dr. Roy has held several other roles focused on educational opportunities and healthy development with foundations such as the Daniels Fund and the Piton Foundation, as well as the Center for the Study of Social Policy. So welcome, Lisa, and thank you for joining us. And she is joined today by Dr. Mark Adler, who is currently in his 8th year as the superintendent for the Ralston Public Schools. Dr. Adler has dedicated more than 25 years to the success of Nebraska's public schools, having previously served in 3 other districts in the state as a teacher, coach, principal, bus driver, activities director, and assistant superintendent. So thanks so much, Mark, for joining us. And next, I'm going to be presenting my colleagues and partners in this work. Karen Twain, who joined Children's Institute in 2019 as Director of Programs to lead the Early School Success Initiative. She'll be joined by Dawn Grotting. Prior to joining us at the Children's Institute, Karen worked in the Tiger Tualatin School District for 33 years in a variety of roles. Karen has been a classroom teacher, special educator, counselor, director of options programs, and most recently, an assistant superintendent. And she will be presenting alongside Dawn Grotting, who is the current superintendent of the Beaverton School District. Dawn joined the Beaverton School District in 2016, and prior to that, he was the superintendent of the David Douglas School District in East Portland and the Nissa School District in Eastern Oregon, where he helped transform both of these districts into statewide models for student achievement. So Karen and Dawn are our first team to share their work bridging the early years to the early grades. Karen, Early School Success is a fairly new initiative and having just launched last year, but I know it builds on the lessons learned from the Children's Institute's first P3 initiative, Early Works, to strengthen community partnerships with school districts and create a bridge between early childhood programs and the K-12 system. Karen, can you please provide us with a little background on this 5-year initiative and how it is using human-centered design, improvement science, and has a sharp focus on equity to co-create an aligned early years and early grades approach?
Sure. Thank you, Marina. I appreciate being here today. I'm excited to talk about the important work that Children's Institute is doing with our amazing partners. I should start off by explaining that Children's Institute is a policy advocacy organization that also focuses on program implementation to inform our prenatal to 8 policy agenda. We're currently partnering with 4 school districts, all working to create high quality early learning programming that is school connected and aligned. And as you can see from this map, we have 2 smaller non-urban and 2 larger, more urban settings. We are trying to learn from a variety of settings, and we are constantly learning and relearning the critical importance of implementation context. We're also looking to grow more efforts, and we'll be embarking on another process this year to determine the possible expansion across the state. Our 2 early work sites are focused on partnering deeply with communities and the families to co-design and in a culturally responsive way the strategies that integrate health and early learning. We partnered with Don Grotting, who you'll hear from shortly, over 10 years ago to learn about building authentic family engagement in schools. And our goal really centers on bringing about systemic changes within a K-12 building to ensure that schools are ready for kindergartners and children are school ready. Through the 10-year journey, we have learned a lot. And one of the lessons learned was that building out early learning systems wasn't enough, that we need to also ensure bi-directional alignment happening in our preschool and K-3 classrooms, meaning that the very best practices from preschool were being vertically aligned up through the early grades. And that some of the high quality structured systems and things that are happening in K-12, such as coaching and high quality professional development, the things that K-12 do well, that they're also being brought to early learning along the way. So throughout this, we are bringing a user-centered design process that promotes co-creation with educators to test and design innovative teaching and family engagement practices for sustainable impacts. Our founding early work sites built demand for more professional learning opportunities in Oregon. The districts asked us at Children's Institute for support to do a number of things. Increase access to high quality early learning services in their districts, to build authentic family engagement. For example, we're working with one of our school districts to identify needed areas of growth in their family engagement work. The data they had initially reflected on was that basically they were knocking it out of the park. But once we engaged with them and dove a little deeper and got below the surface, we had them connect with families that they don't typically hear from. They conducted empathy interviews with an array of parents and determined that they really needed to do a reset on their family engagement and move to things like community circles, which many of you may be aware of, but this is a way for the schools to bring families in to talk and learn more about their social, emotional, and academic needs, as well as either initiate or build relationships. Another ask has been the support of instructional alignment between preschool classrooms and K-5 classrooms to ensure investments in their preschool programs are sustained. And of course, this is particularly important with the current economic situation. While we have 2 school pilot sites, we're also working across districts to support a broad adoption of play and inquiry-based practices. We support district leaders in their planning, rollout, and scaling of these approaches, and then do very deep work with school teams to support instructional alignment and have them serve as learning laboratories or incubators of the innovation to model the practices district-wide. You might be wondering about funding. We were able to secure funding from a local private foundation to conduct some research and design, and then put together early school success by visiting and interviewing staff from other P3 programs nationally, including SEAL and Omaha Early Childhood Superintendent's Plan that you'll hear from today as well. We conducted an interview with over 50 educators in Oregon to understand more about what professional development was needed in order to support high quality preschool implementation and alignment. And then we released a RFP to select our 2 early school success sites, which ended up being Beaverton and Forest Grove school districts. I'm excited to introduce you and hand it over to my esteemed colleague, Don Grotting, the superintendent from Beaverton, and he'll tell you more about our partnership with his district.
Thanks so much, Karen. And Don, we're going to ask you some questions as well. So while the Early School Success Initiative is fairly new, as we already described, your efforts to engage and partner with the early learning community are not. Can you tell us a little bit about the Beaverton School District and the efforts you have taken to align the early years and the early grades, including how you weave social emotional learning and play into your school's classrooms?
Thank you, Marina, and welcome everyone. It's great to be here to learn and share some of our work. A little bit about the Beaverton School District. We're the 3rd largest school district in Oregon, and we're located just outside of the Portland metro area. We are a majority school district with just about 54% of our students being students of color. And I think what's unique, you can read some of the demographics there, but I think what is unique to Beaverton is we have tech giants like Tektronix and Intel in our backyard, and we also have Nike in our backyard, but the district has some significant pockets of poverty. And also, we have the largest homeless population in the state of Oregon. So we really have affluent areas, and we have some significant areas of poverty. So we began this path to expand preschool in our district for about 4 years now. For us, expanding preschool is part of our strategic plan. It is an equity strategy to ensure that our students that are economically disadvantaged have access and opportunities to preschool. We now have 7 preschools in our district serving about 270 children, and our goal is to eventually have universal preschool in our district for all. Currently, the folks that are going to our 7 preschools, we're targeting those families that are 200% and below our poverty level. But we've not only been focusing on preschool expansion, but our district has went through a rigorous planning process with the Children's Institute, where we sought input from many stakeholders to include principals, teachers, community-based organizations, and other learning partners, and that we had buy-in and a strong vision for what early learning should look like in Beaverton. And it was clear that we just didn't want the experience, but we wanted a great experience, an experience that was actually better than some of the private programs some of our affluent children are attending currently. This is where our partnership with the Children's Institute came in, and we applied for the early school success opportunity to ensure that not only were our preschools high quality, but we began that needed transition between preschool and kindergarten, and that learning experiences were well and aligned. And what did that look like? It involved strong instructional leadership for preschool and the early grades, teacher collaboration across early grades, and to co-design and revision developmentally appropriate practices in the early grades. That includes integrating social, emotional, and play into our early grades, as well as inquiry-based learning. And what I'll say, I believe our teachers have been starving for this to happen. And now that we're doing it, they're just feeling more empowered and engaged, and the decision-making process, as well as they're really excited that there's a real emphasis on the social emotional development. And this is where I just want to take just a minute. In K-12 districts, when we try to implement early childhood education, it's really difficult to do. Without an organization like the Children's Institute, we would not be able to do it. K-12, we just don't have that expertise. We don't have the research, the science behind early childhood education, and with the Children's Institute coming along, not only alongside us, but other districts in the state, we're starting to see a movement where we really realize what a quality early childhood education looks like. So we're excited. The other thing that I think is important to know, we really brought our school board on this journey with us. And we have a school board that is very intentional, knowledgeable about what a quality early childhood experience looks like. So we're excited.
Thanks, Don. You brought up some really excellent points there. I really appreciate that. Now we're going to pivot a little bit to talk about how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected your community and your efforts to support, engage, and educate children in the Beaverton School District.
Yeah, as everybody knows, these are pretty strange and unprecedented times. And like much of the country, and I'm sure the organizations that are out there, the pandemic has really significantly deepened the existing disparities and highlighted the inequities in our system and other systems across the country. We have noticed the inequities all the way from access to digital learning, the devices that need to go with digital learning, homelessness for families, and also this COVID has really halted our ability financially to move forward with the expansion of our preschools. Oregon, like I'm sure other states, has been economically devastated by this COVID, and it's really caused us to have to put the brakes on. However, despite some of these challenges because of COVID-19, there have been some silver linings that I believe as we go forward with creating quality early childhood education environments that we can glean from. We're starting to see deepen our partnerships, and teachers have been able to find innovative ways to translate early learning into a digital platform. Not only have we been able to offer high quality digital learning opportunities to support continued growth in literacy and math, but for our youngest learners, we have extended play opportunities into the home setting through things like home STEM packets and other home learning supports. It's also made us really realize how important our families are to us in this process. We always know that our families, that we really needed to come alongside, but this pandemic has really shown us that we need to be very intentional about creating the partnerships with our families. It's absolutely essential. And we also know that when we do come back to, hopefully soon, in a bricks and mortar environment, that we're going to possibly see some of our children coming to us with some additional, definitely learning loss, social emotional regulation issues that we are going to have to be intentional about serving. So it has been a journey, and I know in talking with other superintendents and our learning partners, we're really worried about how our students are going to come back, and we really need to be intentional about how we're going to serve them.
Thank you so much, Don, for your thoughtful leadership. I'm going to shift back now to Karen to hear a little bit more about how the pandemic has shifted implementation and the partnership for the Early School Success Initiative.
Absolutely. So there's got to be some sunshine in the clouds, and we've certainly found it. We have some bright spots. We've had increased collaboration. We've had more thought partnership and deep planning with our school districts, closer and stronger relationships with the parents and families that we're working with, and really accelerated professional development. And I think if there's any takeaway, it's really that we've had to be responsive to what's happening right now. And to give you just a little bit of local context, I'll make it brief, but not just in ESS, but also in our other school sites. For example, in Yoncalla, we're helping maintain relationships through food and meal support and learning packets. At Earl Boyles and David Douglas, we centered equity and are working on culturally responsive teaching during the pandemic. Out at Forest Grove, we've helped with migrant student program for the summer and emerging emergency children, childcare sites. And in Beaverton, we continue to work with them on a variety of things, but right now on the table is the schedule that incorporates play for all when we come back, and especially with the potential of a virtual situation. So ultimately, you know, I guess I just want to conclude by answering and saying that we continue to have on-the-ground relationships to school districts, which helps Children's Institute advocate for the supports that families and children really need. And with an amazing team, an amazing organization, and of course our K-12 partners, we're really excited about the work ahead.
Great, thank you so much, Karen and Dawn. Now we're gonna transition to Lisa and Mark with the Superintendent's Early Childhood Plan in Omaha. Let's begin with you, Mark. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about the Superintendent's Early Childhood Plan and how this unique approach came about, including how it is funded?
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. It's really exciting to be here. The Superintendent's Early Childhood Plan serves 11 districts in the Omaha metropolitan area here in Nebraska. This all started about 10 or 12 years ago. The Nebraska legislature passed a bill, and what their goal was try to level out the funding for students across the two-county area in the metropolitan Omaha area. So what we have in Nebraska, in Omaha, is the biggest district is Omaha Public Schools with about 54,000 students, and then some other districts that are much smaller. To the west of our city is very wealthy and affluent. Parts of the city towards Omaha have definitely challenges financially and otherwise. And so the goal was, how can the legislature help spread the wealth among all students in Nebraska in that metro area? It wasn't a super successful event, and so we went away from the funding part of it, where we were sharing funding across the two-county area. What we did do as a group of superintendents and a lot of our state leaders is identify what's most important for the students in the two-county area, and how do we impact that through our learning community. And one of the things that we thought really make a difference is early childhood education. At that time, University of Nebraska, the Buffett Foundation, and the learning community teamed up. Dr. Sam Mizels is the leader of the Buffett Early Childhood Institute, along with Lisa Roy. Excellent folks to help guide us. And then the Superintendent's Early Childhood Plan began. And the funding now comes from, of course, the Buffett Foundation, a lot of philanthropy here in the Omaha area, as well as a common levy shared across the two-county area that helps with the early childhood program. So it's excellent. It's something we have invested in heavily in the metropolitan area here in Omaha. We think it makes a difference, and we're excited to be a part of it. I know for a fact the Ralston Public Schools and everybody across Omaha.
Great, thank you so much, Mark. That's really impressive work that you all have been able to do out there. Now we're going to shift to Lisa. Lisa, what are the 6 children's learning and development, and what have been some of the achievements of the plan since its launch in 2014?
Thank you, Marina, and I'm glad to be here, and thank you, Mark, for kicking it off. As you can see from the slide, we are committed to closing what we call the opportunity gap. Next slide, please. And we do this through what's called the Superintendent's Plan, which Mark spoke about, where we have 3 different programs within that plan. The first is School is Hub, which I'll go to in a little bit of detail, customized assistance and professional development for all. The customized assistance we won't talk about as much during this presentation, but it's a way to work with all 11 school districts who desire to implement a birth to third grade continuum. And then professional development for all is actually an opportunity to work with providers and teachers who work with children from birth to third grade. And we are going to an online platform as a result of COVID, but we actually had a large in-person training that we would do that would address the needs of kids across the continuum. We'll go to the next slide. So the School is Hub approach looks at, again, that continuum from birth to third grade. We have home visitation for children from birth to 3, ensuring that we have transition to high quality preschool, and then an alignment from pre-K to third grade around teaching and learning. We also invest very heavily in family partnerships that start at birth with home visitation and go until third grade. Next slide, please. So you asked me, Marina, about the 6 big ideas. Obviously we were invited because of our focus on birth to third grade. The School as Hub concept, though, is very unique to me. I have worked in the birth to third grade realm since my days of making connections at the Center for the Study of Social Policy. But this was the first time I'd heard of superintendents taking the lead and saying, we actually want to work with that children, especially in the birth to 3 range. And our principals, and I'll talk about that a little more later, see every child that's born in their community as one of their children. So if their mascot is the beaver, then the minute that child is born, they're a beaver for that school. So that's exciting. Thinking about the developmental changes, parent and family support, and the professional growth and development of teachers, teacher leaders, and supporting principals has been a great part of this work. And persistence is key. None of this happens overnight, and it's a great example to hear what early school success did as far as getting community input into their work, and that's something we continually do through our research. Next slide, please. And so the other question you asked, Marina, is what has been our success? We look at child outcomes and indicators. However, most of our work is on shifting practice and changing culture. And so we look at how principals feel about our work. And as I mentioned earlier, for a principal to understand the importance of brain development and outreaching to young families as they are having young children in their community is important. Our home visitors and family facilitators are heavily invested in a family school engagement component, and that's important. So the minute a child is born, they consider the school in their neighborhood as an asset. That's what School as Hub is all about. We have these components around quality, equity, and continuity that are important to our work. And again, everything related to the family being connected to the school is valued. Next slide, please. I am turning it over to Mark now. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Lisa. Mark, you've been the superintendent of Ralston Public Schools in the Metro Omaha area since before the launch of the Superintendent's Early Childhood Plan. Before you go into the demographics, can you tell us a little bit about your district and the value of the partnerships and comprehensive approach of the superintendent's plan for you as a school leader and for the children and families in your school system?
Thank you, Marina. Yes, the partnerships the opportunities that we get with being a part of the Buffett Early Childhood Institute are just amazing. And some of the things that they've done for us has just increased our research and training. I think Dawn mentioned it just a little bit in, when we collectively work together, the things that we can do for our kids are amazing. And I don't think school systems can do this on their own. We're very grateful to Buffett Early Childhood Institute for helping us with this. You know, another thing that it did that it helped us with is shifting our perception in early childhood to include birth, and we talk about in Omaha through grade 3. How do we look at that as a continuum, that it's so important that we have that continuity from birth to grade 3, and how do we serve those students and those families? We have a more developed home visiting program. It's something that we believe in Ralston. We know that that's been a part of quality early childhood programs for a long time. We actually do home visits with all of our students, grades PK through 9 every single year. We think that's important in how we connect with our families and how we build those relationships. So that increased family engagement is super important. Some of the other partnerships and things that come from this is just legislative and funding advocacy. We know the investment in early childhood is really important. When I think about early childhood, I think about how do we try to work as hard as we can so there's not that achievement gap that develops. And if we get our kids school ready sooner, we're hoping that our students of color, our students with financial challenges don't have that achievement gap develop, and we can hopefully have them school ready and they can be successful from the start all the way through. And so we think that investment in early childhood is really important. The other thing that we work a lot with is just other care providers in the metropolitan area. We know that not all early childhood teachers and providers make the same wage. And so how do we work hard to develop our early childhood workforce, not only in our school, but in our city? And that's been a focus for us.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Again, just like everywhere around the country, your district closed its doors as well in response to COVID-19 in mid-March. What steps have you and the educators and leaders in your districts been doing to reach the support of children and families in your community, including young children who are not yet school age? What have been the biggest issues or concerns you're facing as well?
Very good. So if we could go to the slide that says summer support and fall preparation, we've been working really hard, and I think you have saw some of this already with several of the other presenters. But one thing we're really working on is just review and enhance our professional practice. How do we work with our teachers in what does learning look like when we come back this fall, and how do we refine our practice? Doing more research, develop and plan for the developmental needs of our students. And one thing I think is important is how do we meet our kids where they are? You know, we found through this process when we had to have school closure, some students and families were ready to learn. And quite honestly, some students and families just making it to the next day was as much as they could handle physically and mentally. And so we would really try to support our students where they were. We're developing a learning recovery plan. And so we had to shut down on March 12th. What does it look like when we come back to school? How do we circle back and address priority standards, things that are really important building blocks for our students to have as we move forward? And then, of course, just like everybody, we're working on a return to learn protocol. What does that look like with the virus at the different levels? And then we've really worked hard to implement additional technology devices across the district. We were not one-to-one technology across the entire district. We've invested in that over the summer. We've invested in training for our teachers. And if needed, if we have to go to totally remote learning, we're going to be ready to do that for our students and our families.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your thoughtful plan. Now we're going to switch back to Lisa. And Lisa, Ralston Public Schools is one of the 11 school districts at the Buffett that the Buffett Institute is assisting as a part of the superintendent's plan. Can you just tell us a little bit about the challenges and responses across the full metro area that you're encountering?
Yes, and if you could go to slide COVID-19 and beyond, that would be appreciated. Thank you. So there are many challenges. Before COVID-19, I would say our biggest challenge was just making sure that we were working at a systemic level to change practices and culture, as I mentioned earlier. During COVID and currently, moving into the fall, food scarcity is a huge issue, along with technology, and then I would say parental support. A lot of times we are focused on the child only, and we're not thinking about how the family is being impacted during COVID at this time. What I've appreciated about all 11 school districts, and specifically the 6 that we work with full implementation, and that would include Ralston, is that we have been able to partner with them to consider how we might address these issues. Going forward, we want to be proactive, of course, and think about how we can support distance learning, but especially families, because they are the ones who are at home with students, whether it's a hybrid model or students are learning at home and supporting them through this. We have been fortunate with our growing a great kids curriculum and home visitation that we've been able to align and adapt from birth to age 5 with families and helping them around the issues that I discussed, food scarcity, technology, and parental support. But we want to make sure that we're able to do that through 3rd grade. And that's challenging when you're working with multiple districts who are not or in session with summer school and other issues. So this has definitely shown a light on some of the things that we feel like we need to change going forward and be in contact and connection with families. So we will still consider how we move forward in supporting districts, but again, that distance learning and parental support will be 2 areas that I believe we will focus on very heavily in the fall.
Thanks, Lisa. That's super helpful to hear and learn about how you and the districts are pivoting during this time. So now we're going to shift to hear from SEAL and move forward to the SEAL slides. Anya, we're going to shift over to, thank you, there's the SEAL slides. Anya, since 2008, the SEAL model, Sobrato Early Academic Language, has been working in a growing number of schools across California, an impressive number of schools across California, really, to support the success of English language learners. What are the 4 pillars of the SEAL model, and what are some of the results you've achieved to date?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Marina. So SEAL's mission is to prepare all English learners in California, dual language learners in California, to learn, thrive, and lead. And as you stated, we started as a project of the Sobrato Family Foundation in 2008 with a pilot in 3 elementary schools and their feeder preschools as a preschool through 3rd grade model. We began replicating the model in 2013. And so if you move to the next slide, you'll see a map of our spread. And so we have expanded quite rapidly, strategically across the state. In the state of California, 60% of children 0 to 5 speak a language other than English in their home. So our focus is really to centralize the needs of English learners while supporting all students. The goals of SEAL are in many ways what you would expect. We're focused on mastery of rigorous 21st century standards and expectations and access to the full curriculum, which we see very much as a civil rights issue, real access to the full curriculum. High levels of cognitive language and literacy skills, including biliteracy wherever feasible, and a real deep commitment to the development of home language, which we know is so critical for English learner dual language success. Children prepared for academic success in elementary school, but also beyond, so a real trajectory of success. And this last goal we take very, very seriously, creating confident, motivated, engaged, and joyful learning. And we understand this final goal is actually key to getting to our other expectations and goals. The pillars of SEAL, our 4 foundational pillars, are very much built on the research base. So rich, powerful, precise, expressive academic language, again, across the full curriculum, creating affirming and enriched, culturally responsive, linguistically responsive environments for learning, that critical articulation across grade levels with the alignment between preschool and the elementary years, and then the strong, strong partnership with families and schools. And I think you've heard that across all the three groups of us presenting today. So next slide. The model is enacted through an integrated thematic curriculum where language development happens in and through all learning and where there's a thematic connection across all content areas. SEAL's comprehensive change strategy really touches all parts. So we focus very much on students, of course, and student achievement, but we do so with a really deep understanding about the importance of teacher professional development, professional learning, and collaboration. So the critical role that collaboration plays in supporting teacher development. We think about the system, that articulation across systems, the preschool system into the K-12 system, as well as working in sets of schools and working at all levels. And I think you've heard that as well as a theme, principals, coaches, district leaders, as well as, of course, teachers. And then this piece again around family partnerships, so critical to partner with families. So when we talk about SEAL and our model, we talk about it as being a really comprehensive approach, not a time of day or a standalone program, but really a comprehensive approach. And to share a little bit about our results, if you see from this slide, you can see that here we have two of our districts that have implemented SEAL district-wide, so in all of their elementary schools, where our students who are reclassified fluent English proficient, so they started as English learners and reclassified, are outperforming the state. And so similar students across the state, although in these districts, the demographics are actually higher risk than some of the statewide demographics. And then if you also look at the next slide, you'll see that, of course, we understand the central role of teachers in enacting this kind of learning. And so our results also show that field teachers have a very, very strong sense of efficacy, a real strong sense that they are able to enact this research-based practice, the key components. And this graphic highlights three key components around the parent partnership, complex and high-level language, and the importance, of course, of oral language interaction, which is so critical for all students, but particularly for our dual language English learner students. Lastly, I'll share a data point from our principals, and we see that 90% of principals report very high levels of implementation, really seeing that their teachers are enacting the research-based practice. So we continue to see, as we replicate the model across the state, very strong results at all these various levels.
Thank you so much for that great overview, Anya. Now we're going to transition over to Linda. She is with Redwood City Schools, which was one of the first two pilot sites to begin implementing the SEAL model. Linda, can you tell us a little bit about your district and what this comprehensive approach to learning in preschool and the early grades looks like? And what impact has it had on the district and on children's success in your schools?
Thank you, Marina, for the opportunity. So Redwood City School District is located in the Silicon Valley. We're a small district with just over 7,000 students. We've seen declining enrollment in the last few years just because the cost of living has increased greatly in the last few years. 67% of our students are Latino, 50% economically disadvantaged, with 30% of our students English learners. And that's with diverse backgrounds in terms of language experiences coming from throughout the world. It's a very international area. The greatest impact, I think, in our district has been when we first started working with SEAL in a local assessment at the end of second grade. Close to 40% of our students were reading at grade level. And now in an assessment that we just took right before we left, actually in March, right before we had to all be sheltered in place, we had 58.9% of our students in second grade reading at grade level. And that has been a significant increase for us in our district. And so another impact or from what that stemmed from is, next slide, please, a comprehensive approach to learning and teaching. So what that looks like for teachers is opportunities for cross grade level teams to learn together, effective pedagogy that becomes a common language for our teachers. So we have preschool through kindergarten teachers working together and second through third grade teachers working together so they can see the continuum of these standards and what that looks like at their particular grade level. There are purposeful opportunities to develop these integrated units that Anya was speaking of that connects language, culture, and cognition. That's grade appropriate content through science and social sciences, because we know that it's important for their high school and beyond to ensure a comprehensive school experience. They have, we've learned intentional use of high leverage strategies so that when principals, who are also a key part of the professional learning experiences, they can go back to their school sites and coach teachers, as well as the pedagogy coaches that we have in our district can support the teachers in their learning and teaching approaches. The next slide, please. And so in our district, we ensure that all of our students have opportunities for science and social science. I think there are at times, there is a belief, I think, that when students come to us with high needs, or there's such a pressure to provide students with language arts and math, yet not providing them with a comprehensive approach to their learning. We know that in high school and beyond, those sciences and social sciences opportunities that they receive now become the foundation of even future career paths. So we can't leave these, the core content out of the experiences, even beginning in preschool. So here's an example of what's happening in kindergarten. So students are learning sounds, they're learning to read, they're learning everything that's foundational reading skills through their science and social science focus, because we know that these experiences are important for them in their future. And we're able to do this by providing structured oral interactions through the science and social science focus. So we have opportunities to develop that key vocabulary that's needed for comprehension and for their reading success in the future. And we provide many opportunities for students to kind of feel what it's like to learn through to develop critical thinking skills so they can communicate, collaborate with peers at age appropriate levels, so they can show what they know in a very creative way to extend their learning experiences that they're receiving. And so you'll see it in a sealed classroom. What it looks like is highly engaged students who are really excited about their learning, hands-on experiences that allow them to show what they know, that integrates those foundational literacy skills and you'll see that in writing. So the next slide, please, that talks about authentic writing for purpose. So students, after learning content, are showing what they know. This is a preschool example, but they're sharing that key content vocabulary that they're learning that demonstrates that they've comprehended the literacy and the content that they're learning. And so through these authentic writing purposes and opportunities, students take those foundational reading skills and they are able to show what they know in a number of different ways. So here's just writing, but opportunities to show what they know through inquiry projects, which I think is the next slide. So students take that content and they are experiencing through these inquiry-based centers, dramatic play that's appropriate to preschool, but in the upper grades and third grade, their inquiry-based learning takes them through creation of demonstrations or PowerPoint slides or using Book Creator to show what they know and through a book that they've created online. So all of these, again, are age appropriate, but it takes those foundational skills and applies them authentically through science and social science that continue to develop that content literacy. Another key component is that opportunity for the family engagement. And so we work hard with the parents in terms of bringing them into the classrooms. A lot of our families might not feel comfortable because maybe they haven't experienced success in their own schooling. So we provide lots of opportunities for students to share what they know. We honor the family and their culture, and we try to integrate that throughout our units as well. And then taking this information, we were able to kind of apply it to what's currently happening in the parents' lives right now and to their families' lives.
Thank you so much. That I have had the honor of going into a few SEAL classrooms and seeing the rich learning and the joy of learning really come through. So I appreciate you sharing that with us, Linda. So how has your experience with the SEAL model and partnerships provided a foundation to help you support children and families during the recent COVID closures?
So our next slide, our impact has been, so we had already developed district-wide units of study focused on either science or social sciences. And we aligned these district-wide to provide opportunities for teachers to work across districts. So we were very fortunate to have teams of teachers working together. And what we saw is that these high engaging lessons that we knew was a part of developing students' academic language was an essential part of what's happening. And we needed to continue to develop even during our school closures. So for the next slide, Pete, please. What we saw were teams of teachers coming together. And we're going to share an example of that in the preschool unit in just a moment. But teams of teachers came together across the district, even though they were, isolated in their own homes. They knew the next unit of study district-wide. They knew what the next lessons were to be. They knew how we needed to engage the families in these units of study because we had already created them. And so for the preschool is a perfect example of what happened is the teachers across working with their principal, the preschool teachers across the district came together virtually, and they pre-recorded lessons that could be shared with other preschool programs. And so we knew the key lessons in our unit, and what the preschool team did was to create these series of lessons that we were able to share with all of our families in the preschool program. Obviously, our district had to work to make sure that our students receive the technology devices that they needed and the hotspots that they needed. Even with that, we still had some families who didn't have that opportunity. But throughout the district, we tried to connect with as many families as we could. And I think second grade and up in preschool, I think we're the strongest examples. And in certain sites in first grade, we saw the teams of teachers coming together in this example that you're going to see in this preschool unit of study. So I'm not sure if you can go ahead and share that.
Hola niños y niñas, les saluda la maestra Roxana. Vamos a seguir nosotros enseñándoles sobre los insectos, pero esta semana nos toca enseñarles sobre el ciclo de vida de la mariposa. Vamos a leer todos, ¿ok? La mariposa y otros insectos tienen un ciclo de vida que se llama metamorfosis. Miren conmigo. Metamorfosis. Ahora vamos a usar nuestras manos y vamos a decir las sílabas. Metamorfosis. ¿Otra vez? Bueno. Metamorfosis. ¿Cuántas sílabas escuchaste? ¿5? Sí, fueron 5 sílabas las que tiene la palabra metamorfosis. Y al final les va a salir una oruguita así como esta, ¿verdad? Trabajen con sus padres para que esta oruguita salga así y tal vez les quede más bonita a ustedes con la ayuda de sus papás. Ahora vamos a cantarle una canción a nuestra oruguita. ¿Ok? ¿Listos? Vamos a cantarlo. Usen sus manos, agarren sus manos vamos a usar para una oruguita. Una oruga hambrienta yo soy. Put your thinking cap. Now it's time to think in English. Hello, friends. How are you? I hope you're doing well. I am Inga Fernandez, the teacher who will be presenting this video to you. Let's sing. Who came to school today? Everybody, everybody who came to school today. Everybody. A butterfly is an insect. It has 6 legs and 4 wings. Can you draw a life cycle of a butterfly? Can you draw eggs, caterpillar, chrysalis, and the butterfly for me? Thank you so much.
Great, I love the video. It's so wonderful to see how you've been able to translate all of this work over into this digital format that looks so engaging. So now I'm going to transition back to Anya, just to finalize the SEAL presentation. Anya, what are just some promising practices you have seen in Redwood City and other schools that are using the SEAL model during this transition to distance learning?
So I think what you saw there in that example is really highlights. What's so critical is that even though there are so many obstacles, we do have, and none of us have experienced anything like this before, we do have and we do know what children not only need, but also deserve. So we know that working closely with our district partners, we're helping them to implement distance learning in a way that, and what will become likely hybrid learning environments that focus on and maintain a commitment to these core components of the SEAL model. So if you go to the slide that says SEAL within COVID-19, we maintain a deep commitment to this idea of oral language development in both English and the home language. So how do we create the structured, rich oral language? We maintain a commitment to joyful, engaging learning, and that this thematic connection, the integration of language development with content is in many ways the most engaging kinds of learning that we can create. This commitment to small group instruction and differentiated instruction, again, a theme throughout this, I think all of the presentations you've heard a real deep focus on socio-emotional and really in this time, a trauma-informed teaching, and then this partnership with families. So critical that we create tools and strategies to make that connection with the learning that's happening from the school, from the teacher, with what's happening at home. You saw that example at the very end where the teacher was prompting the kids to draw the life cycle. Also, but really regular, consistent points of connection with families, and really even on a one-on-one basis. We're highly recommending these kind of homeschool, home visits, even if it's just via the phone. So I think one of the things that I just want to highlight in closing is that we also warn against some of the tendencies that we know are happening and that we know are detrimental from history. So the narrowing of the curriculum, decontextualized teaching of skills in isolation, and the sink or swim mentality that so many historically English learners experience with very little targeted or differentiated support. So it's really critical that we are taking what we know from past failed practices and applying them within this context. So all of this is so hard, and we're all working incredibly hard to make and to partner, and I think partnership is definitely such a key important strategy in this time. I think for all of us that believe in and understand the importance of early learning, quality early learning, it's so critical that we're supporting our teachers and our school leaders to ensure that they have the best support, the professional learning to meet the needs of their diverse students in this very unprecedented time.
Thank you so much, Anya and Linda. And I think that, you know, your last statement was so critical and important to think about those supports that need to be in place. And really, as we look to probably doing more of this in the fall, thinking through this will be so helpful, I hope, for other districts that are on today to think through this level of support and intentionality for both educators and our families. So I'm going to transition us over now from the presentation portion over into the Q&A. And we've gotten some great questions in the chat box, so thank you all for sending over those questions. I'm going to start off with a question from Leslie Simmons, who asks, how are you all deepening family relationships within the current virtual reality? And we saw some examples of that, but I'd love to open it up to our panelists. Lisa?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Well, obviously, when you're doing home visitation, you adapt. And so we are working with families online through the use of Zoom and other platforms. And families are able to also upload videos of what they're doing with their children. We are in an important space around this. I've heard this on other webinars, but I think, again, families are in isolation, and many of us are probably tired of Zoom meetings because we're on them day in and day out, but that family that does not have access, usually, this is an important time for them to connect with other adults and know that these stressors are incredible right now. And so even that acknowledgement that we're all going through this together and we're here to support you, and thank you for supporting me as well, because it's about connection right now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. Does anyone else from another one of the teams want to address that question as well?
Marina, I was just going to say that's one of the biggest concerns that we have. And I know we've talked about it in our preparation meetings, but just the social emotional health of our students and families. So, you know, connecting through Zoom, connecting through phone calls, connecting through notes. You know, we're doing a lot of meals for students and families, so connecting with them when they come to pick up the meals. But I don't think that, at least my concern for the social emotional health of our students and families is going to reduce as we start the school year. So it's definitely one of the top concerns.
Absolutely.
Marina, this is Don. I'd just like to reiterate what Mark said. Trying to do some of those strategies as we go out and we continue to feed our students. Sometimes our family liaisons will go on those trips to, whether it's possible to apartment buildings or to schools where that food is being delivered, and just to make sure we break down poverty barriers, but also language barriers. So our family liaisons and our multilingual department has been instrumental in helping that. But we have a long ways to go because we know that we're not reaching all of our families.
I would add, at Redwood City, we did similar opportunities for parents, and we have an organization that was started by a SEAL teacher called Familias Unidas that provides workshops for parents. And what they did was take those workshops that they were doing and they did them online with their parents. And so they connected with them, gave them the tech devices so they could have the Zoom meetings with them at home. And they provided opportunities to also experience positive interactions through art or music. And they taught their students they taught the parents to work with their children and finding some opportunities to generate some positive experiences at home and memories, because it was so stressful for our families. So they worked with them social emotionally as well as academically, and teaching the parents how to navigate some of our tech tools, etc. But that was a big part of what was needed, in our surveys from the parents showed that they appreciated all that support, and they needed that contact with other parents. That was very strong.
Thanks, Linda. We've seen some similar things in the districts we're working with as well. I'm going to shift to another question. During Dawn's presentation, a question came up when, Dawn, you made the comment about how challenging it is to, or it would be nearly impossible to do the work without the partnership and the support of the Children's Institute. But what does that really mean for the possibility of scaling this work to a meaningful degree when you're, so reliant on some TA partnerships? So I'd love to first hear from Karen and Dawn about how you're thinking about that sticky, challenging issue, and then open it up to the rest of our team.
Yeah, so I answered in part in writing that people can refer to, but I think that we're trying to help our schools identify problems of practice. And once you do that, you do a really deep dive and you see the system. And once you see the system, you see where there's lack of localized expertise, and then you try to reallocate your resources. And ultimately, we're building a sustainable model. I appreciate that Don thanked us, but over time, he won't need us anymore if we do our job, right? His system will be set up and he'll be ready to go. And that's what Beaverton's doing. They're reallocating their resources and they're spending time on this.
I think it's important too, Marina. It can't lie on one specific organization. And I think we've been really trying to work with her. It's with our teachers union, OEA, working with our Confederation of School Administrators, the Department of Education, and it really has to be a collective lift here. We can't put it off on one organization. But as we discover the importance of early childhood education, both from an economic standpoint, sustainable standpoint, and what it's going to really mean for the success, it's hard to fight that science and research. It says this is what we need to be doing, but yet probably in most of the states, like our state, we continue to not invest the way we should in the most important years. So I think it behooves us all to bring those other thought partners in with us, and specifically to K-12 education. Sometimes we get stuck in our own way. We think we know everything, and just that opportunity to reach out to our early learning partners and bring them alongside us, because I think they're very willing. But I think sometimes it really relies on the K-12 to say, we do not know this work, we need help in these areas, and to come alongside us. And I found that whether it's Head Start or private partners, they're very willing to come alongside of us. I think we just need to learn how to ask.
I appreciate that. We are definitely not the only game in town and the only critical partnership to make this work. Lisa, Mark, do you have any thoughts on that question as well?
I always have an answer, and I'm sure Mark does as well. But in thinking about this type of collaboration, what I've appreciated about all of the presenters is that it does take multiple perspectives at the table. And so we need to understand, especially during COVID, how to meet the needs of families as partners. Because again, we are relying on families more than we ever have. They are an essential part of a child's life from the time a child is born till they go to college and beyond. We're there temporarily, and so we need to figure out how to be the best partners possible. And I've appreciated Mark's example of how he's thinking about the social emotional needs of the families right now. And our goal as partners with the school district will be to figure out ways to offer professional development and learning to all providers from birth to third grade to support students and their families during this time. So that's just one example.
I'd say one of the things that I really appreciate is our partnership with BECI and many others allows us to continue the path that we are on, but with a lot of other resources, knowledge, and research to make everyone better. So I feel like we've learned from BECI. I would hope they've learned a few things from us along the way. And I think that positive inertia with all of us going forward is pretty powerful. You know, I can't not speak to this. I saw Judy Dvorak make mention of social emotional needs in our chat and how important that is. And then sometimes we don't have enough time for it. I'm just going to tell you, we must make time for that. In my opinion, that rises above curriculum and other things that we have to do because our the social emotional position of our kids is so important that I'm not sure how a young person can learn if they're not in a good spot. And so I agree, and I just want to raise that up. What Judy mentioned on there, I think that's something we got to definitely focus on. So, yeah, I think that's what I have.
Thank you so much, Mark, for addressing that. I was going to bring that up as well. And I just saw that a survey popped up on my screen. I don't know if everyone can see that as well, the partners poll. So I think that means, Sarah, that we're at the end. Oh, no, we're not at the end. Okay, phew. I would love to continue this conversation. I think we're just getting into the good stuff. So I just wanted to make sure that Anya and Linda have a quick moment to follow up on any of these comments that have come up, either the social emotional learning piece, or also you've done an amazing job scaling your efforts across the state of California. And I would love to hear about either of those things.
Anya, you want to talk about the scaling up? I think that's important.
Sure. I mean, just in terms of the socio-emotional, I think for us, we really keep going back to this idea and commitment to integration. So it's not one or the other, but how do we do these things in concert and together? And that I think it's really powerful when kids are engaged and active in learning, their socio-emotional is also being taken care of. That being said, when kids are upset or unable, to be present in an emotional way because of trauma and because of what's going on, we have to recognize that and have tools and support. So it's really in thinking about it in a whole way rather than in a segmented way. I just want to also elevate, because this has been a big part of many conversations we've been having, which is also related to the socio-emotional support of our educators and of our staff and ourselves in doing this work. And that we can't, we need to be really multidimensional about how we're taking this approach in this really complicated time. And so, teachers are going to be, who are going to be interacting with our kiddos the most, either in person or virtually, they are going to be best situated to support the whole child in all these ways and do this complicated work when their needs and their socio-emotional health is also being supported. And so it's all, this is about the journey. It's not about the destination, because we're going to be in this in the long haul, and every day is a challenge, but really important. So I wanted to elevate that as well. In terms of scaling, we definitely have thought long and hard about this. And I think both a deep commitment in partnering in really comprehensive ways. And I think these are three great examples of, the kinds of partnerships that are deep and lasting. They're not a light touch. And that's really important. As we've become an independent organization, we've also thought about having a wider, less deep touch and how we get our kind of resources out into the world, knowing that it doesn't have the same kind of customization and touch that I think you hear represented across our three efforts. So I think, we both understand that there's a need for resources, tools. We have what was already posted. We have a YouTube site. We will be sharing more curriculum and units. We usually think it, rather than in lesson plans, we think in actual kind of real learning intervals that are a little bit longer than just a lesson, a standalone lesson. But so we will be sharing more and more. Our team is working really hard to get as much out there for anyone and everyone. And so I think, you know, it's really in thinking about the different kinds of scale. Scale can mean many different things. I think what's most important is having cross-sector and multiple levels involved. And I think that's also what you've heard here. It's not just teachers, it's not just superintendents, right? You know what I mean? It's gotta be multidimensional, and districts can do that, and many have on their own. But when you do have a strategic partner, it can be quite powerful, as you can see.
Great, thank you so much, Anya. I think we have time for one more quick question that has popped up. There was a question about how you all are conducting parent engagement. Wondering about, do you have outreach workers to invite parents to workshops, home visits, etc.? And I'm wondering if we could kick it over to Lisa. I think she looks ready to answer that first.
Thank you. And Mark, I hope you'll back me up, but we have family facilitators, home visitors, and then within the Buffett Institute staff, we have staff to support their work around what we call community of practice. And so it's incredibly important, and anything we do to make sure parents are involved. I think I've said that 3 or 4 times since I've been even on this webinar. So do we do this perfectly? No, but we do believe that families are essential in our goals to close the opportunity gap. And so we are currently heavily invested in that, and we'll figure out ways during and post-COVID to have more of a partnership to have positive impacts for young students and their families.
I would agree with that, Lisa. And as a district, we do additional things such as family engagement nights, barbecues. We'll have morning breakfast with parents. Anything we can do to build that relationship with a parent. Like I said, we do home visits for all of our students, pre-K through 9. And you know what, I'm sure it doesn't look exactly like a preschool visit, but really it's all about how do we meet a parent on their turf, on their terms, learning about their student, and how can we serve them better. And you know, just beginning that relationship from the start in a positive manner. So we don't think there's a substitute for the partnership we can have with our parents.
This is Don. I would agree with everything that's been said. One of the things that during COVID that we found out that we really needed to do was we have a help desk for digital literacy to help parents. And we made sure that as much as we could, that we had folks that on that help desk that could speak the native language. And that has been number one. Parents have so much respected that we would think about that, because many of our parents are just feeling frustrated about their children can't go to school, but they want to help them. But sometimes that language barrier really gets in the way. So trying to make sure that on our help desk that we have native speaking languages available for that. And that's made a big difference during COVID, and to the point that we're thinking about, you know, some of those silver linings that we found out through this pandemic, that we need to really look across all of our systems and try to break down some of those language barriers that exist.
I think I will add, in addition to that as well, we have we leverage our community school partnerships. I apologize if you hear my dogs. We leverage our community school partnerships to make the connections. So Boys and Girls Club, for example, supported that work in connecting with the families. And then our director of communications created a podcast for parents. And so we leveraged our Facebook and created podcasts. And we increased substantially. Before we had maybe 50 to 100 Facebook hits, but now it's thousands hits, because we created smaller podcasts for parents to hear about key information of where to receive resources, etc. So that was something else that was very positive that we heard from our parents that supported them.
That is so awesome to hear. I love that idea. I just want to remind everyone to please complete the survey before you log off. And I appreciate all of the copious comments that have been coming through in the chat, and just I feel like you're all cheering us on for this work, and I hope that you've learned some great things today. And please don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us collectively or personally afterwards if you have any follow-up questions. We've shared some links in the chat for you to get to know each of our team's work a little bit better, and really hope that this is just the first of many conversations.
Thank you so much, Marina. Thanks especially for nudging about the survey poll, but especially for the wonderful moderation, all of the planning that went into today's conversation. Thank you for that. I'd also like to share a deep and heartfelt thank you to all of our panelists, to Karen Twain and Don Grotting in Oregon, to Lisa Roy and Mark Adler in Omaha, and to Anya Hurwitz and Linda Montes in California. Thank you all for all of the planning and thought that you put into today's conversation and for sharing this great work. I hope that all who have been joining in on this conversation were as informed, as inspired as I was. Lots of great information to think about, silver linings to lift up from this really challenging moment that hopefully can carry through and bring about some systems change in how we do our work moving forward as hopefully COVID-19 becomes a distant memory one of these days. Thank you. I just wanted to do a quick reminder about all of the great sessions we've got coming up. There's the GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar series that will be continuing in the coming weeks in the 3 p.m. time slot. If we could go to the next slide, again, we're launching a new special series just for funders, funder-to-funder conversations that will be taking place the last 3 Tuesdays in the 12:30 p.m. Eastern time slot for funders to come together and talk about how to collaborate and co-invest and learn together. And then also another reminder about GLR Week 2020, the sessions that are planned in addition to GLR Learning Tuesdays and the funder-to-funder conversations. We've got 3 additional sessions that are being planned by the campaign. We'll be sending out information about how you can register for those very shortly. And also we'll be launching and sharing a calendar where you can find out about all of the great events that state leaders like Marina, who's leading the work in Oregon, but also state leads and states across the country and community leads are organizing to lift up and share the work that they're doing. Great resource for all of us to learn from and with each other. So keep an eye out for that. Action-packed July is headed your way, so no summer breaks for all of us. Until then, thank you so much for joining in. I hope you'll take care, and I hope to see you in upcoming Tuesdays. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.